We all know the iPhone as the product that reshaped the world, but the real creators? They aren't the names you've heard. In hidden rooms at Apple, a small team of engineers, designers, and marketers worked under extreme secrecy, racing to turn an impossible dream into reality. They built the most influential device of our lifetime, combining glass, aluminum, and software into something magical. And then, one by one, they disappeared from the spotlight, their achievements buried under a single name. So, what really happened to the geniuses who invented the iPhone? And why did they walk away at the peak of their success? The iPhone was never just a phone, it was Apple's next bet to change the world. And to pull this off, Steve Jobs needed the best. And that's where our cast of characters comes in. Jony Fadell was a former engineer from General Magic and Philips and had already proven himself with the iPod. He knew how to build a portable device that could change consumer behavior. His role was hardware, the physics guts of the iPhone. Scott Forstall came from NEXT, Jobs' post-Apple company. At Apple, he led the software team and was responsible for building iOS. That polished interface, the touch gestures, the animations, Forstall's fingerprints were all over it. Jony Ive was the design wizard. He'd already created the look of the iMac and iPod, but with the iPhone, he redefined how a phone could feel in your hand. Sleek, glass, metal, no buttons beyond the essential. This was Ive's vision. Phil Schiller was the marketing muscle. He didn't just sell products, he sold emotion. He helped craft the story behind the iPhone and made the world fall in love with it. Together with Jobs, they spent years crafting a phone that would do what no other device had done: call, text, browse, play music, run apps, all in one seamless package. The iPhone launched in 2007. It was a miracle. But behind the scenes, tensions were brewing. When Apple needed someone to build a device that would revolutionize the world, they turned to Jony Fadell. He wasn't just another engineer. They needed a builder of breakthroughs. Fadell had come to Apple in 2001 after his startup folded. His idea for a music player failed to gain traction, but Steve Jobs saw potential. Within months, Jony delivered what would become a cultural icon, the iPod. But that was only the beginning. By 2005, Jobs promoted him to lead Apple's most secretive project, Project Purple, the creation of the first iPhone. It wasn't just a phone, it was Apple's future, and Fadell was in charge. Fadell didn't just build the iPhone, he defined it, its physical form, its curves, its materials, the battery, the dock, the screen, all under his direction. He managed every inch of the hardware, down to tolerances of fractions of millimeters. He helped craft the aluminum frame, the smooth glass front, and the exact feel of the home button. His team was small and sworn to secrecy, hidden away in a nondescript Apple building. They worked long hours in complete isolation, nights, weekends, and holidays. The pressure was enormous, but Fadell pushed through. He obsessed over every detail, the way the phone felt in your hand, the way it sounded when tapped, the overall magic. But it wasn't just about design. Fadell was steering through chaos. Hardware didn't sync with software, screens scratched too easily, batteries drained fast, suppliers missed deadlines, timelines slipped, the keynote date didn't, and through all of it, Fadell held the line, driving his team forward and keeping the vision alive. The pressure was extreme, but the outcome was history. When the iPhone launched in 2007, it shocked the world. The crowd erupted. The product was unlike anything ever seen. But while Apple celebrated, Jony disappeared from the spotlight. In November 2008, Fadell resigned. Officially, it was to spend more time with family, but insiders whispered of other reasons: burnout after years of stress, tensions with top Apple executives, or a decision to cash out while at the peak. Some say he clashed over the company's direction, others say he saw the shift that the iPhone was no longer just hardware, but a force too big to control. The man who engineered the future of personal devices walked away just as Apple's engine began to roar. If Fadell was the iPhone's body, Scott Forstall was its brain. He led the software team, creating the look, feel, and logic behind the iOS. From pinch to zoom to the iconic slide to unlock gesture, Forstall helped define what it meant to touch the future. Every swipe, tap, and scroll bore the influence of his vision. He'd been with Jobs since the NEXT days and followed him back to Apple. Steve trusted him deeply, and that trust gave Forstall the power to build iOS from the ground up. With a team of software rebels working under immense pressure, total secrecy, and impossible expectations, they weren't just coding apps, they were building a language for a new kind of computing. Forstall wanted the iPhone's software to feel intuitive, playful, even magical. He insisted on fluid animations, lifelike responsiveness, and a real-world interface that mimicked textures like leather, glass, and paper. Skeuomorphism was his religion, and under Jobs, it worked beautifully. Notes looked like yellow pads, calendars looked stitched, every icon felt tactile. But not everyone was a believer. Some saw his design style as dated, too ornamental for a world rapidly embracing minimalism and flat design. And after Steve's death in 2011, the tides began to shift. Without Jobs to shield him, Forstall clashed with other top Apple execs, most notably Jony Ive, who championed clean, flat design. The tension grew, and when Apple Maps launched with embarrassing glitches, missing locations, distorted graphics, bad directions, the backlash was intense. Apple's reputation took a rare hit. Forstall was asked to sign a public apology. He refused. That bold move put him directly out of alignment with Tim Cook's more collaborative, less ego-driven leadership style. Insiders said he'd become increasingly isolated, less of a team player, more of a relic from the Jobs era. Some believed his management style was divisive. Others said he was simply too closely tied to Steve's legacy to thrive in the new Apple. And so, in 2012, Apple did the unthinkable. They let him go. No farewell speech, no celebration, no transition, no press tour. He simply vanished from the company that built the device he helped bring to life. No one filled his role. His responsibilities were split between other execs. It was as if Apple was wiping away his fingerprints, cleaning the slate, and starting fresh. The man who designed the iPhone's soul was cut out, pixel by pixel. Jony Ive didn't just design the iPhone, he shaped the very identity of Apple itself. The curves, the glass, the aluminum, the obsession with simplicity. That was all him. His vision wasn't just about looks, it was about feeling. He believed great design was invisible, intuitive, and deeply human. From the colorful iMac to the iPod's scroll wheel to the iPhone's seamless glass and metal body, Ive's fingerprints were everywhere. He saw devices not as tools, but as experiences. To him, products should be beautiful, emotional, even spiritual. He wanted users to feel calm, connected, and inspired just by holding an Apple product. He and Steve Jobs were soulmates in design. They challenged each other, trusted each other, obsessed over details together. From the way a MacBook clicked shut to the sound of an iPhone lock screen, every nuance mattered. Their bond wasn't just professional, it was philosophical. Jobs once said that Ive understood him better than anyone else at Apple. Ive suddenly carried far more than just product design. He took on responsibility for the overall user experience, everything from hardware to software, even retail store architecture. He became Apple's design oracle, but the weight of that expectation was immense. He was stretched thin, creatively and emotionally. And as Apple's product strategy evolved, shifting from revolutionary leaps to incremental refinements, something began to fade. The spark, the magic, the boldness of early Apple was harder to find. You could feel it. His heart just wasn't in it anymore. Design decisions became more committee-driven. Consensus started to replace instinct, and by 2015, the signs were clear. Ive was pulling back. He delegated more and more to his team. He began spending time away from Cupertino, choosing to live part-time in London. His voice in Apple product launches grew quieter, his presence more distant. Then, in 2019, it became official. Ive left Apple to start his own design firm, Love From. He said it would continue working with Apple as a client, but it wasn't the same. The departure marked the end of an era, the quiet exit of the man who made aluminum feel warm and software feel alive. There was no drama, no scandal, and no big farewell speech, just a soft fade out from the company he helped define for over 2 decades. The man who gave Apple its face quietly walked away. If Steve Jobs was the mind behind Apple and Jony Ive was the soul, then Phil Schiller was the voice. Loud, passionate, and endlessly enthusiastic, Schiller had a way of making you care about every feature, no matter how small. He joined Apple in 1997, right as the company was clawing its way out of near collapse, and from that moment on, Phil became the hype man of innovation. Whether it was introducing the iPod Shuffle or screaming boom during iPhone reveals, Schiller brought heart to the hardware. He didn't just rehearse lines, he lived them. Behind the scenes, Schiller wasn't just a pitchman, he was a strategic powerhouse, helping shape Apple's product positioning, marketing philosophy, and even naming conventions. He had a seat at the table for major product decisions and helped turn complex engineering into consumer excitement. Phil stood by Jobs through the darkest and brightest moments of Apple's history, and when Jobs passed, Schiller remained. Through the Tim Cook era, through the watch, the HomePod, the M1 chip, he kept pushing. He helped Apple navigate a new chapter without ever losing its voice. In 2020, Schiller stepped down from his role as Apple's Senior VP of Worldwide Marketing, transitioning to an Apple Fellow, a title reserved for legends. He handed off most of his day-to-day responsibilities, but didn't completely vanish. Today, Phil still helps guide the App Store and product launches, but he's no longer the voice booming from the stage, more like a quiet presence. Still watching, still carrying the torch behind the curtain. The man who sold Apple's dreams to the world now stands behind the curtain. Everyone remembers Steve Jobs, but the iPhone wasn't built by one man. It was Tony Fadell who created the hardware, Scott Forstall who brought the software to life, Jony Ive who gave it its soul, and Phil Schiller who convinced the world to care. And yet, their names rarely appear in the history books. They're not on magazine covers, they're not household names. They created the most successful product of the 21st century and slowly vanished from the stage, one by one, through quiet exits and faded spotlights. Without their genius, Apple's biggest hits never see the light of day. Jobs was the captain, and they were the crew that sailed the ship. And together, they created a device that changed the world.